a lot of people say, but they're not going to hear it during surgery. So why are we listening during surgery? Well, in addition to blocking the other music and the sounds and the conversations, the body responds to that rhythmic pulse, even when they're not consciously hearing the music. So that's why I chose music that had that steady pulse that, the vibrations will entrain the patient during surgery. They're not hearing the music per se, but their body is still responding to that.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this week's episode of the First Case podcast, we are speaking with Dr. Alice Cash, CEO and founder at Surgical Serenity Solutions. And we're really going to be taking a look at a very valuable non-pharmacological intervention that we can employ to help our patients move through the entire perioperative experience. We're going to be talking about music, and we're going to discover all of the many benefits that music has to offer.
And it's not just for our patient, but it's for us too. Music is a very vibrant part of the operating room, and to be able to understand how it affects the whole patient and our ability to care for them and to manage their pain, I'm really excited. Dr. Alice's passion is incredibly contagious.
Absolutely. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back with Dr. Alice Cash.
Hi, I'm Chris Blevins.
And I'm Melanie Perry.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Dr. Alice Cash, CEO and founder at Surgical Serenity Solutions. Dr. Alice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Melanie. I've been looking forward to this and all that we'll get to reveal.
I know, I am too. And honestly, I have to say, as a musician, I'm trained in piano and in voice. So naturally, the topic of music is one that I absolutely adore. But music isn't just for entertainment. We genuinely can be affected by music. And I think sometimes we either forget that or we don't realize it. And we don't realize the power that music can have on us, not just emotionally either. Music can affect us physiologically as well. And so with that in mind and understanding the power of music, when I was looking at this season, of course, I want to talk about music because I love music. And you were the expert that I wanted to talk to because you've done so much research and study in how music affects patients in the surgical setting. So before I just sing your praises completely, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell everyone a little bit about your background?
All right. Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm so much, and I agree with every word you just said. My background is in piano performance initially. So I have bachelor's and master's degree in piano performance. And then after teaching in a college in South Carolina for many years, I decided to get a PhD. And I got a PhD in musicology, which is research in music, typically music history. But in my case, I had a wonderful professor at the University of Kentucky who gave us lots of information about music and health and music in the brain initially. And I was fascinated by that. So got the PhD, and then after getting a wonderful job at the University of Louisville School of Medicine, I got another master's degree in clinical social work. And so I have done a lot of work with therapy in hospitals, family therapy, chemical dependency types of therapy. But I also was exposed to people who were about to have surgery and were really, really frightened. And I realized that nobody was really talking about how music might be helpful in that area.
It is a very good story, and it shows just how much you know and how much you've studied music, and then that awareness that, yeah, people aren't thinking about how it plays into our surgical patients. But you also had your own experience too in the hospital that also was kind of the driving force to continue this study on pain and music in the surgical setting. Can you tell us about it?
Right. So when I found out I was expecting my first child back in 1976, I realized that one of the things they were doing to help a woman through labor and delivery was something called a saddle block. And it involved having a needle put in your spine. And I was like, no way.
No, thank you.
Nobody is putting a needle in my spine. No way. And so I started the Lamaze classes, of course, and the Bradley classes later. And I thought, there's got to be a way that I can use music to help me through labor and delivery. So I did. I was introduced about that time to the Pachelbel canon, which I'm sure you all know. Everybody knows.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Pachelbel canon. And that just really helped me to get through the waves of labor and delivery, 18 hours of it to be precise,
nice.
Because I was induced. Yeah, I wasn't quite ready.
All our mama hearts. We're both moms, and both of us are cringing for you right now.
Right. Well, I had two more daughters. I have 3 grown daughters now, but that was my initial music in the hospital experience, was when I gave birth in 76, 80, and 82. But in 90, that's when I started working at the University of Louisville School of Medicine as coordinator of music and medicine. And I was given just lots of information, and I was sent around the country to study with some of the leading people in music medicine, like Don Campbell, the man that wrote the Mozart Effect, if you've heard of the Mozart Effect book.
Yeah.
And my name is in the index, you all. You need to look in the index. You'll see my name in regard to music with surgery. These were the early days. So anyway, I started being invited to speak a lot about music with chemical dependency, music with Alzheimer's patients, lots of different medical areas. And one night, a friend of mine went with me, and she said, Alice, what you talk about is so interesting, but the one thing that you talk about that I don't think people know anything about is music with surgery. And I think you should go deep with that. Talk a little bit about how it can help in all these areas, but start going much deeper into the surgery. So I thought, well, I'm going to do a little experimenting with that. So that's how I first got into it. Now, my first patient was actually my mother.
There we go. I was going to ask you that.
I got a phone call one day saying, Alice, you better come on down to South Carolina because your mother's getting ready to have heart surgery. And I was like, what? I mean, we didn't even know she had a heart condition. So I had just started with the music and surgery. So I took a stack of CDs down there and my little Walkman in surgery and said, Mama, you've got to use music during your surgery because it's going to help so much in terms of not needing as much medication. And it just it blocks the sound of the surgeon talking and the surgeon's music. And at first she didn't want to, but eventually she said, okay, I'll do it. Just don't play Nearer My God to Thee.
Yes, because we kind of want to get a little on the other side of the spectrum.
We feel like we're at a funeral with that song. Yeah, we don't want that.
No.
So she ended up listening to Handel's Water Music, which was really a beautiful, beautiful choice. And so when they ended up doing 5 bypasses, And when my father and I were called back to the recovery area, there were just lines of beds, patients recovering. But as we got close to my mother's bed, she almost sat up a little bit and she said, "Oh, Alice, the music was beautiful. Bum, 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 bum." I was like, wow,
Yeah,
this is
there's proof to the pudding, as we say.
Yeah.
my mother. I couldn't believe it. I mean, she's a minister's wife and very proper. And here she was singing in the recovery room and saying, "I'll never have surgery without music again."
That's phenomenal. And I have a
And I'm going to
question
tell all
though
my friends.
about,
Sure.
yeah, about that, because it's hard to get access from the general public into the operating room. I mean, we are a very restricted environment purposefully. And so that you had the faith of your mother to be able to, experiment, if you will. But it's my understanding that you too have been in that situation. So you've put your money where your mouth is, or right? Or your violin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So after, yes, and I guess it was right after, no, it was actually before my mother used the headphones. I found out I needed back surgery. I had a bulging disc, L4 and 5. And so I was just learning about the power of music and surgery. And I said, could I take some tapes in that I will prepare? This was in the day of cassette tapes and a Walkman, if y'all remember all that.
Yes, showing our age, but yes,
we are
do.
aging ourselves. Yes.
So they said, my doctor was wonderful. The neurosurgeon was absolutely amazing. He said, sure, if that'll help you, bring it in.
Awesome.
And he literally taped the Walkman to the surgical table. And, my face was down because it was back surgery. And my Walkman was taped to the table. And then I had headphones. And they said that it was one of the most successful and shortest procedures they had done because I was just so relaxed by the time they started. And it just went exceedingly well. And he said, I'm going to tell more people about this. However, at this time, I was having to make my own tapes every time for pre, during, and post. So the pre-tape was for anxiety primarily. The during tape was to keep the heart rate and the breathing entrained with the pulse of the music, and also to block the surgeon's music, which at that time there was a surgeon playing Another One Bites the Dust, which the patient does not need to be hearing that.
No, and we typically turn it down whenever, during intubation. And that actually brings me to one of the things I really wanted to ask you about. So we do listen to a lot of music in the operating room. It helps us focus. It also helps us remain calm. It helps just in so many ways for our energy as well, in a different format than what it does for the patient. And typically what is listened to is based on the surgeon, not our preference.
Right,
and that can
right.
vary greatly, right? But I wonder if there are different music it's not songs necessarily, but I did some
Maybe
research
genres?
and genres. It's my understanding there are some studies out there that different hertz levels can have different effects on the body. And so can you speak to that and how you choose what songs are appropriate for which portion of the surgical experience a patient's going through?
Well, because I am choosing music for potentially thousands of people, one of my, my business coach tells me not to give away my secret sauce too much. So without telling
Stay
you
with us.
precisely right how I do that, one of the things I had read is you do not want to use lyrics at all, that it's all instrumental, because words engage the left hemisphere of the brain and the person starts thinking about, do I agree with that? Do I like that? Is that Elton John, or who is that singing? So I decided purely instrumental music. So my classical, jazz, new age, lullabies, and memory care, all purely instrumental. And they all have the tempo of the healthy resting heartbeat. Those are the things I focus on. Plus, then I decided, classical music, of course, is what I know the most about. But there's a lot of classical music out there. And if I chose the most familiar things, like, let's say, the Moonlight Sonata, Clair de Lune, things that people know, and the patient played that on their 8th grade piano recital and had a memory slip, they don't want to be hearing that. They do not want to be hearing that if they're pushed into surgery.
It's triggering. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to be triggered.
I chose music that is unfamiliar to the average person. Now, if the person's a musicologist or a concert pianist, they might say, oh, I know that McDowell landscape, But for the most part, because I don't want to trigger people, and I don't want, one lady told me one time that somebody was playing Amazing Grace when she had surgery, and that upset her terribly because she said she associated that with funerals and her grandmother that she loved dearly, that they played that. And so I decided, let's choose music that is not familiar. Plus, I needed to choose music that was basically in the public domain.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, because, the first large group of headphones I ever sold was to the VA hospital here. And they specifically asked if I could do 50 that had classic rock. And I said, oh, I would love to, but unless you own the rights to that music already, I can't.
You didn't just call up the Eagles and be like, hey, I got to play it.
Right. Well, I have thought about contacting some famous, like, classical guitarists or singers to say, would you like to donate some of your files for people having surgery?
Service is a big deal, I think, and to make a difference in a way that's in an unconscious person as opposed to someone, that is in a different situation, I think is a neat opportunity.
For entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Melanie said, this is about entrainment, not entertainment. And a lot of times when people first read some of my blog posts, they're like, oh, I think you meant in entertainment. I'm like, no, I meant entrainment, which is synchronizing the body rhythms to the pulse of the music, the breathing, the heart rate, the blood pressure, keeping all of that stabilized with music.
So let's talk about that a little bit further. If we think about the physiological effects that music has on our bodies when we are patients in surgery, can you walk us through how music is affecting patients in pre-op, in post-op, and in surgery?
Sure. So when a person arrives at the hospital that morning to have surgery of whatever kind, or a colonoscopy or endoscopy, doesn't always have to just be surgery, chances are their heart rate is rapid and their breathing is shallow because they're anxious. They don't know what's about to happen. A lot of times they're fearing the worst. I'm not going to wake up. So when you put the headphones on them, you can almost time about 2 minutes and they're going to start breathing slower and in rhythm with the music. Their heart rate is going to calm down. Their blood is going to become more oxygenated because they're taking much deeper breaths. And by the time, a lot of times it's easily 30 to 60 minutes before they're wheeled into surgery. And sometimes it's way longer than that. But I know, for example, I guess cataract surgery was the last surgery I had. And I had my headphones with me, but the nurse automatically said, I have a 10 milligram Valium for you. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. I don't really need that. She said, are you sure? And I said, yes, my music will do fine to calm me down. But then as you're in there, not only does it maintain that healthy resting heartbeat and the slow, deeper breathing, but like I said, it blocks the music that the surgeon might have that the patient may not really care for.
Trust me, the team sometimes doesn't really care for it. So
exactly. The surgeon is the DJ, I'm thinking.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there's also bleeps and blips of a lot of machines that the patient really doesn't need to hear. And they're conversations. I've had people wake up or after the surgery say they heard nurses talking about what they had for lunch or their date the night before. So when the patient is listening through the headphones, the music goes straight to their brain through the eighth cranial nerve, and they don't have to be aware of anything else that's around them. And a lot of times, as they're waking up, first thing they hear is the music, and they're like, ah, it's over. I'm still alive. I made it. Get me home
That
as soon
music
as
is
possible.
orienting.
It's
It's orienting
orienting.
for them. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, Dr. Alice, we know that there are different levels of anesthesia, just like there are different routes of, of giving anesthesia to a patient. But, hearing fades and hearing returns and, along with different senses. But what does your research show with the hearing for patients during the surgery under anesthesia at that operative level?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked me that, because a lot of people say, but they're not going to hear it during surgery. So why are we listening during surgery? Well, in addition to blocking the other music and the sounds and the conversations, the body responds to that rhythmic pulse even when they're not consciously hearing the music. So that's why I chose music that had that steady pulse, that, the vibrations will entrain the patient during surgery. They're not hearing the music per se, but their body is still
Their body's
responding
still responding.
to
It's
that.
almost as if their body's feeling the music.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which then so that's helping maintain a healthy normal heart rate. It's helping to maintain a stabilized blood pressure, helping to maintain those normal functions that we want, correct?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And it's almost, the price of this is negligible, honestly. And we are, in addition to our preloaded headphones, we are now getting ready to introduce a new device for non-surgical areas of the hospital. Because again, the VA is the one that really wants this for the vets. And it's going to go into chemotherapy, dialysis, behavioral health, pain management, all the, and it's going to be probably a fifth of the price of the headphones. And the headphones are very reasonable.
Well, that's great. And also, not just that, but we find PTSD and children have anxiety, and our students have anxiety in the classroom, and then also, that just those emotional responses, no matter what you're going through, will still affect you from a hemodynamic level, and that can be detrimental, but it can also really help the patient. Don't you all agree? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This could help everybody. But when my friend said, Alice, people know about music with Alzheimer's patients, they know about music with strokes and cerebral palsy and all of those areas. They don't know about music in surgery because, like you said, they're assuming, well, you're asleep during surgery. And I've had people say to me, whatever the doctor chooses for himself is fine with me because I want him to be happy.
So listen, okay. So little story time with Melanie for just a second. I had one particular surgeon that I worked with, and his music was so loud that the OR, the walls of the OR, the outside of the OR was a hallway for our inpatient side of our hospital. And the patients on the other side of the hall would complain that they could hear his music from their rooms when he was in the OR. And we would have to get him to turn his music down. Hey, and it was this really heavy rap, rock, like big stuff. So we have a patient laying on the table, no headphones on or anything like that. And the music is loud and fast and heavy, and the patient can be affected by that too, right?
Absolutely.
What's it do
and
to 'em?
especially, of course, it's very individual. It would depend on the age of the patient, how sick they are, how good their hearing is. It's possible that if it is a contemporary of the surgeon who actually likes that music, but still, it's going to get their heart rate and their breathing entrained with that. And I don't think you want them to have a lively hip hop beat going on in there.
No, I don't
I'm
think
not
so.
going to say it will hurt them, but I don't think it's going to help them.
Well, I
I
just
don't
know
think it's recommended.
as loud as his music was, I knew that if I was laying in that room, I'd wake up with a headache just because of how loud it was and how overstimulated I am just outside his room hearing the music. So just one example of, the OR environment definitely having an effect on our patients and remembering that they're still responding whether or not they can technically hear or not due to the anesthesia.
Right, absolutely. And, when you think about procedures that require sedation, but not general anesthesia, like knee replacements.
Mm-hmm.
At least in Louisville, they
Yeah,
do those
we do
just
them too.
because they have to talk to the patient and say, wiggle your toes or do this or that. And so people have said, if I'm wearing the headphones, can I still hear the doctor if he needs to talk to me? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
These are not noise canceling headphones.
Yeah. My first experience actually with music and surgery was at the last facility where I worked, and they were doing research on music and surgery with our patients who were having total joint replacements, and they weren't being completely, they weren't having general anesthesia. So they were providing these different headphones for them to sit and listen, because it did, while the patient was getting propofol for sure and they were kind of relaxed, they could still hear the hammering and the sawing and all of
Drilling.
the noises.
It's a very noisy environment.
It's very noisy. And so
that's what I've heard.
The headphones were helpful. And yeah, if they needed to talk to him, they just pull a headphone off the ear and be like, hey, we got a question. So it was easy to communicate with the patient for sure. But there's one other question I want to ask, because I want to hit this before we wrap up our conversation today. And that has to do with the role of music and how it can help with reducing pain. We've kind of hit on it here and there and really talked about it, but I want to give you the mic to really tell us how music is going to help us when we're looking at controlling postoperative pain.
That is a very important point, and I don't know that I can tell you specifically because I am not a medical person.
Sure.
I'm a social worker.
But what you have seen.
But what I have seen and what I've been told is that the music is so beautiful. It sort of transports a person to another part of their brain, I suppose, so that they're not just focusing on, ouch, my whatever is killing me. It can supposedly help to reduce nausea. And I know postoperatively that is very important, that the patient cannot be throwing up when they leave the recovery area. So I think part of it is distraction, in all honesty, and part of it is the relaxation effect that the music has on the person. Because when you're tense like this and you're stressed out, the pain is going to be like in labor and delivery. That's why you got to do that deep, slow breathing, because that helps relax everything. And the music tends to lead the patient to breathing slower and deeper, just like when you were going into surgery. I think the orienting effect also, because sometimes people wake up and they are almost hysterical. They don't know where they are. They don't know why they're attached. They might start trying to pull stuff out. And that music is going to be the same thing they heard when they were going under. And the nurse needs to explain to the patient, we're offering you these headphones. You don't have to take them. But research has shown people who use these need less pain medication, less anxiety medication, sometimes less anesthesia.
Well, there's actually coordinating information to point out in the AORN guidelines. I was going through them today, actually. And AORN has a guideline on complementary care. And Section 6 has Section 6 is all about music interventions. And in the first paragraph of 6.1, it talks about a group who was doing evaluations. Whole is the last name of the person listed. But it says they evaluated research on the benefits of perioperative music interventions for postoperative pain, anxiety, use of analgesia, and patient satisfaction. And the researchers found improvements in all of these outcomes and concluded that perioperative music interventions were beneficial. So it lines
Absolutely.
up exactly with what you've seen.
No doubt about it. And I'm familiar with that study and that person. That was done in England, I think.
They didn't give me a location. But it was
a meta-analysis.
Yeah, it was from 1988 to 2013. So they looked at a lot of information. But,
and there have been a lot of studies recently, not just about music, but just this season, we're talking a lot about the opioid epidemic and overuse and misuse of narcotics. And, those patients still are experiencing pain. They're still experiencing the things that required the prescription in the first place. But, allowing them to be in pain isn't the option. We are trying to find different modalities, and music is absolutely being shown to be one of those that can reduce pain, reduce swelling, which is a precursor to pain, and have effects even deeper, as in our pineal gland, which produces melatonin, if I remember correctly. So it's just, there are so many physiological reasons to have this, but at the same time, that soul, we've all heard the song that just affects our heart. And to be able to take that with you into a scary situation in the operating room, I think is such a blessing.
It is. Absolutely.
We are at the end of our interview, so before we wrap it up, please go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you and where they can read any other information that you want them to know about.
All righty. Well, my website is surgicalserenitysolutions.com. I wish it weren't so long, but someone had already taken Surgical Serenity and someone had already taken Serenity Solutions. So I'll put it all together, and that's mine.
Okay.
surgicalserenitysolutions.com. And then if you add /boost, BOOST, you will get a free report on how music affects the mind and body and how you can use it for energizing or calming, because as you know, it can do either one. I've got so many stories I'd love to tell you, but if you go to my website, you'll see my blog, and I have over 400 posts about music and surgery and almost any question you could possibly ask, many of which we did address today. You hit all the most important ones for sure. And I have a book that is mentioned, a link to the Amazon site called Having Surgery, Using Music to Reduce Anxiety and Pain Perception.
You've got it covered.
I hope I do. And I am looking for people to take my company into the future because I will be retiring soon.
Okay, well then if you're listening to this and it really sparks your interest, you can
please contact me through the website.
Let us know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's interview. Thank you so much, Dr. Alice, for sharing your expertise with us and with our audience. This has been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you again. And I don't know what else to say. How do I end this interview?
We've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
We really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed talking to you all. I love talking to surgical nurses. So anybody that would like to contact me and have a conversation, let's do it.
All right,
it will be a wonderful experience. Thank you so much, Dr. Alice.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
That was Dr. Alice Cash, and I know, Chris, that I'm partial because I love music, I've studied music, I perform, and music has a special place in my heart. But we've learned so much in this interview about how much music can help our bodies physiologically, how we respond to pain and anxiety when we're in surgery. And Dr. Alice just really enlightened us in all of the ways that music can affect us.
It has done so much for us as OR personnel because we know how the music that is played during the procedure affects us. And to be able to have that different perspective as to how it's affecting our patient, it just makes you all that more aware of the things that we do and how that can overall affect, especially the pain management postoperatively, which of course none of us want our patients to be in pain. And that ties in with this season so well.
Absolutely. We have seen many different ways that many different people throughout the season are combating the opioid crisis, how they are working to reduce narcotic prescriptions after surgery so that we can reduce addiction and abuse. And here we have another non-pharmacological way that people can employ to help patients reduce anxiety, reduce pain. Research backs it up. So I just think it's a win all the way around. But that is going to do it for today's episode. So on behalf of Chris, myself, and the whole team here at First Case, thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.